Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to a few of you. I'm Dave with Bona, and I've been with Bona for 19 years. And prior to joining Bona, I installed and refinished wood floors for almost 20 years. And I actually started using Bona products in 1985. So one of the things I enjoy about doing presentations on Bona systems is I feel that I'm just sharing with you some of the techniques that made me successful in using these coatings. So having used these products, I enjoy talking about them. Well, since many of you are here to get industry credits, either with AIA or IDCEC, the presentation will follow principles of neutrality. But before I begin, I just wanted to mention that Bona is a 103-year-old privately held Swedish company, and we have a very good history and heritage when it comes to doing wood floors and coating wood floors. And essentially what we've done is we've taken that history and heritage and really expanded our focus into the world of refurbishing resilient floors. And so the system that I'm going to talk about today is very, very similar to some of the attributes as far as coating a wood floor is concerned. And just a fun little fact, Bona in Swedish means to polish. So for years, Bona has been advocating the polishing, caring for wood floors. Well, in today's presentation, I'm going to show you why you no longer have to polish your floors. I don't know what it will do for my career, but let's give it a whirl anyway. So with that, we'll begin the actual presentation. So I'm going to start out with another fun fact that has nothing to do with floors or coating floors, but has to do with PowerPoint presentations. The average person who conducts one speaks about 135 words a minute. Many of you can read upwards of 300 words a minute, especially with the monitor right there in front of you. I, unfortunately, on the other hand, speak 97 words a minute. And there is a reason. I am from Boston. And if I don't enunciate every syllable, the most hideous accent on the planet will manifest itself. And I'm simply trying to save you from that. Because trust me, for those of you who remember, no one wants to hear Cliff Clavin from Cheers deliver a CEU. But I also tell you that story because I want you to know and be confident in the fact that I am not going to read this presentation to you. We have all sat through way too many of those over the last couple of years, and it's not going to happen today. But what I am going to do is highlight specific points on certain slides and elaborate on them a bit. So as you look over the learning objectives for today, my goal is to share some data and insights on sustainable floor renovation. And we continue to see growth and demand in this industry for sustainable solutions, materials, and processes. So what used to be somewhat of a trend really has become an integral part of building construction and renovation. In fact, I'm hearing the word mandate being used in lieu of trend, and it's not going away. The market is primed for companies willing to meet sustainable demands. In the modern world where resources and energy are becoming scarcer and impact on the climate is increasing, well, the full extent of the consequences in terms of cost, energy use, and climate effects needs to be evaluated and taken into consideration. So the challenge is, in years past, refinishing a resilient floor simply was not an option. The floor was stripped and polished multiple times until you couldn't do it anymore. And then the floor was torn up, tossed in the landfill, and then replaced with new material. Well, lengthening the service lifetime of products before being disposed could be an effective solution in achieving reduced impact on climate change and improved resource use. Now, in the wood flooring industry, floor refinishing has been part of that business model really for a very long time. In fact, when I told you I was from Boston, I lied, I apologize. I live in Plymouth, Massachusetts. I live 40 miles south. And 2 years ago, Plymouth celebrated the 400-year anniversary of the arrival of the Mayflower and the Pilgrims from overseas. And so it's not unusual in my area to find wood floors that have been treated and coated for over 200 years. In fact, HGTV just highlighted one in a neighboring town called Plimpton, where they refinished the floors that existed when that home was built, and those floors were 288 years of age. So on the wood flooring side, we have a long history of refinishing wood floors, but resilient floor owners in the industry do not always recognize that floor refinishing is a viable alternative instead of installing new flooring. This results in flooring that technically can be recoated and refinished, but unfortunately it is replaced. So if the share of refinished flooring is increased, the impact on climate change and resource use is expected to be significantly improved. And so this is the solution. This process transforms the color and design of a resilient floor with the ability to repair torn and damaged areas. With a range of base colors, the system also offers color chips that can offer a more premium look. Some of these chip options include a stone or a terrazzo look that can be completed sometimes in just a matter of days or in even hours, which allows businesses to resume their daily operations. So whether a facility you're currently working with wants a new design, maybe they want additional chemical durability, or maybe they want to be able to clean that floor a little bit easier, or maybe they want the combination of all three, this system of products can help achieve that type of flooring surface. It also provides the facility with many added benefits, including minimal downtime, cost savings, and a positive impact on the environment. Resilient floors are still appearing in many commercial facilities today, so providing a sustainable solution to revitalize these floors is a top priority. So one of the reasons why this subject is so important is just look at the size of the market. You can see that resilient has really risen at the expense of carpet, whereas wood and other items are continuing to maintain steady growth. And by the way, when I talk about the resilient flooring market, I'm including the wood flooring as well, only because of the fact that it can be treated. So we're looking at about 7 billion square feet a year. And so this is why this subject matter is so important. And when it comes to the resilient flooring market, what we are seeing is that 72%, as that slide mentions, of these buildings are well over 20 years of age. And these facilities are replacing and updating these resilient floors. And what this does is there's all kinds of construction waste ending up in landfills. That top bullet point says 230 to 530 tons. I was on the EPA's website yesterday, and it mentioned that it was 600 million tons in 2018. Now, keep in mind, I've been in construction my entire career, and trust me, I get it, that waste is associated with renovation. But in addition to construction waste, maintenance of these types of floors requires stripping the floor on a regular basis in order to clean it and get the shine back. I refer to this as the yuck factor because look at the statistic there, 10.5 million gallons of stripper in 2017. We're now in 2022. That translates into 53, 54 million gallons just in the time from 17 till now. And so when we look at that lifetime usage, it's really a daunting number. And when we think about the slurry material that is produced, that either ends up in the landfill or it goes down the drains of the facility, this does not give anybody a warm and fuzzy feeling because it has a negative and toxic impact on the environment. So I did not invent the word circular economy, but when you look at the slide, I understand what it's really referring to. You know, a circular economy has less of a negative impact on the environment. But the problem is in the flooring market, the trend has recently gone to what we call a linear economy model, where things are produced, used, disposed of. And I can tell you, I really started to see this in the mid 90s when laminate floors were introduced. These were floors where you took a photograph of wood grain and then you put a melamine plastic over it. And so they referred to those floors as laminate. And I remember, as I was installing wood floors at the time, seeing these floors installed and kind of chuckling under my breath, well, that's going to keep me busy 10 years from now because there's no way those floors are going to last that long. And unfortunately, while I'm no longer chuckling because I'm seeing all of these types of floors being thrown into landfills, that prediction was definitely correct. So even with the cost and environmental impact of building and flooring materials, we're still finding that owners and contractors decide to tear out these materials and replace them with new material. So today I'm going to use the country of Sweden as kind of like a test example because there's a lot of commonalities that we have with the Swedish market. And since that country has a forward-looking perspective, we're going to compare some statistics from that market to North America. So in Sweden, every year, 270 million square feet of hardwood and resilient flooring is installed. Now, what we're also seeing is that the market for coatings of wood floors are decreasing, indicating that fewer wood floors are being renovated. So, if this is true of wood floors, the concern is that PVC flooring may be viewed solely as a disposable material. Well, what does this mean? What does this add up to? Well, if the life cycle of a PVC floor is 10 years, flooring installed today, PVC flooring installed today, if it's replaced versus being renewed, will require the equivalent of 4,680 football stadiums of landfills 10 years from now and every year after that. So obviously a very sobering thought, which leads us to a very important question that you see on the screen in front of you. So due to the rising use of all these types of resilient floors, in 2019, the Swedish Environmental Institute, or IVL, which is a third-party research group, wanted to do a deeper dive into this question. And with this question, it took into surfaces like wood, PVC, resilient, and rubber. Was it more sustainable to renovate or to replace? Now, they're a very highly respected organization, and they really focus on interactions which are important between ecological, economic, and social perspectives. Now, I'd like to give you a little bit of a background story on this, and I can use my own example. For years, I have been preaching that renovating is always more sustainable than replacing. Well, now this organization, IVL, comes along and says, hey, we are going to challenge your findings. And by the way, Dave, if you're not correct, we're going to let everybody know because these findings are readily available and they are published. So, knowing that this was going to take place, these findings that we're going to talk about, combined with the wide variety and quality of different type of resilient flooring options that are out there, really mean that architects and designers need to carefully specify and source the right materials with sustainability, efficiency, and budget in mind. So when it comes to climate impact renovation, the use of primary energy resources, especially renewable energy resources, is drastically reduced since refinishing allows continued use of existing flooring material. And the report also made a couple of other interesting observations. And just one minor one is that doing this minimizes the contractor travel back and forth to the job to do a new floor install versus what it takes to do a renovation. So when it comes to the carbon emissions that we're describing here, refinishing a resilient floor has a positive impact on climate change because it reduces the carbon footprint. In fact, it's 10 times lower refurbishing, refinishing versus replacing. And as you can see in this particular slide, the assessment included all the products used from electricity, consumables, waste treatment, and even transportation. Now, the main impact on the environment as a result of floor refinishing in a commercial property is caused by the production of the raw materials used to produce those goods that are going to be used in the refinishing, what we would call the primer or varnish, and then its end of life treatment. Sanding process, the application of these products and these other consumables had a relatively low impact on the process. And so what did the report find? The numbers that I'm showing you here pertain to wood floor refinishing, but since we're talking about resilient, I can let you know that the carbon emissions on the left-hand side of your screen are actually 92% CO2 savings when it comes to resilient floors. And obviously that, as you can see by the middle slide, is the equivalent of 9,600 flights around the world. I mean, just a tremendous savings. And the statistic that is correct on the right-hand side, the energy savings, 95%. One of my footnotes in the presentation mentions that these savings correspond to the yearly energy use of 9,000 households in a small Swedish town. And having been to Sweden, I can tell you right now that any town in Sweden that has less than 9,000 people living there, you cannot pronounce the name of that town, or at least I can't. So instead, I'm going to compare it to a place that some people or most people are familiar with, and that is the island of Nantucket. So the energy savings from refinishing resilient floors can power almost the entirety of a place like Nantucket. So when we consider really the entire building envelope and the building materials that are being used, such as flooring, it really does contribute to a large proportion of carbon emissions. So those of us who are in the manufacturing of building materials really have a responsibility to do a better job and look for solutions that will ease the situation that we are in. So measuring and reporting on climate impact from all parts of the building process, including these materials, is becoming increasingly central to what we do on the manufacturing side. So architects and designers have the power to influence and educate home and building owners on the benefits of refinishing and therefore sustainability. So whether we refinish a floor rather than tear it out and then install a new floor, we have a tremendous opportunity to lean into sustainability as a key specifying point. So not only is green construction on the rise, but homeowners are asking for eco-friendly materials and systems for their homes. So what type of resilient floors can we refinish? Well, these are all the types, and I'm going to go through them one by one. Linoleum. Linoleum is made from natural materials, and what's interesting about the history of linoleum is those products started being produced in the 1860s. And they were very sustainable because they were made of natural materials. Now, I know that linoleum has become pretty much a generic term used, but in the 1960s, linoleum started being replaced by vinyl flooring. So, anyways, anytime we can renew a linoleum floor, a true linoleum floor, it's actually in keeping with its natural composition. So that's a good sign that we have the ability to treat any of these remaining existing floors. Rubber. Natural rubber is not very biodegradable. In fact, its decomposing period is something like more than 100 years. Now, given rubber's importance as a global resource material that's used in so many industries, recycling rubber is of very high importance. I don't know about some of you on the call, but I remember where I grew up in Bridgewater, Massachusetts, we had a dump. That's what we called landfills back in the day, where trash and tires were burned simultaneously. Obviously, not a very good thing for the environment. According to the EPA, approximately 18.2% of rubber was recycled in 2018, and obviously the bulk of that being from automobile tires. And what's interesting about the rubber sports flooring industry is of all the floors that are being installed out there, 25% of those floors do come from recycled rubber. So I think that is a good message, but also knowing that we can recoat that rubber floor versus renewing it really shows that this is a prime candidate for this renewal system that we are talking about. So most vinyl floors or VCTs are reprocessed from plastic containing all kinds of toxins, phthalates, all kinds of chemicals that Dave can't pronounce and Dave doesn't want to be able to pronounce. They really do harm the environment because they can migrate out of the flooring and get into the air that we are breathing inside our homes. And home health and humanity has definitely become more important to each and every one of us. The air that we breathe is very important, and we don't want these things to be able to accumulate within our bodies, within our systems, because they happen to stay there for a long period of time. LVT flooring, luxury vinyl tile. The reason why they call it luxury vinyl tile is because they can't call it polyvinyl chloride because nobody would buy it. So they came up with the term luxury. Well, as most of you know, luxury comes at a very high cost. Over 14 billion pounds of vinyl flooring are manufactured in the United States each year. To give you an equivalent of what that means, if any of you have ever flown into Chicago, Chicago is a big city, and it feels like you're landing in Chicago for hours before you finally get there. Chicago is 234 square miles. So this 14 billion pounds of vinyl flooring that's being manufactured is the equivalent of being able to cover the entirety of the Chicago area. And one of the main materials used to create vinyl flooring is petroleum, which is a non-renewable resource. And so many times that petroleum is coming from thousands of miles away, creating additional waste and air pollution. And from a recyclability point, vinyl is nearly impossible to recycle. And I'm going to read to you why it's impossible, because I haven't memorized this yet. That is because the recycling process requires you to have a consistent level of various substances throughout the material makeup of the vinyl. Unfortunately, different types of vinyl have different chemical compositions, often making them incompatible. This is compounded by the adhesives, which are usually stuck to the vinyl when old floors are lifted from underlayment layers. And the recycle rate on vinyl floors right now is 1%. That is obviously not a good sign for our environment. And the same thing is true of PVCs, which are not biodegradable. And before the conversation gets any better, I'm going to make it just a little bit worse and address the last flooring that can be utilized with this system, and that is vinyl asbestos tile. My colleague Frank, who introduced this, lives in New York City, and there's a lot of VAT in New York and in Chicago and other major markets. And OSHA basically has special standards for VAT, which means dry sanding of it is against the law. It is prohibited. It has to be done with low abrasion, wet abrasion, and at speeds that are under 300 RPMs. And you can only buff it if it has enough finish on the surface so that you don't break through into the asbestos part. So obviously for public housing and school systems, this is a problem in many major markets, and yet this system, as you're going to see in the case studies that we're going to show you, we are able to successfully renovate. So renovating versus tearing out is an innovative, growing option with many benefits, including minimized environmental impact, reduced downtime, and it results in an attractive floor. So whether you are choosing to renew a floor because it's ugly or because it's too difficult to clean, facility managers, owners, and designers are discovering that renewing versus replacing can have a real positive effect. So over the next couple of slides, I'm going to kind of review what this process is. I'm not going to dial into it too deeply, but I will give you an idea that that different base colors and coatings really give you a lot of options to be able to create very unique looks. And this is the very first step, and this is probably the most challenging part of the system, is stripping that floor, because we need to get and remove all the polish, dirt, debris that has accumulated on that floor. But the good news is that this is the very last time that this floor will ever need to be stripped. And that detail really has a positive impact on indoor air quality going forward. And keep in mind, remember the amount of stripper being used per year, 10.5, 11 million square feet. Once again, where is it going? We don't know. And so obviously that this could become the last time this floor is stripped is very important. Then, so it's stripped with diamond grit abrasives. And right now this process must be done as a wet strip. I know that research and development is working on ways to be able to do this as a dry abrasion, because the benefit of dry abrasion is that these machines can be hooked up to dust containment systems. And now any of the dust that's associated with these processes can immediately be disposed of, and not released into the environment of that home or commercial space. And then this is the time to neutralize the floor, get it clean, make any repairs prior to the process of renewal. So that process looks something like this. And you can tell from the photograph in the upper right, this is a very heavy pigmented coat that in most cases, only one coat is needed to be applied in order to take a surface and giving it a premium look. It is a water-based coating. It is a two-component. It is a 20% sheen level, and this particular type of product is also Green Guard Gold certified. So that is the first step in transforming this resilient floor to give it a new look. The second part of it is as the color is being applied is when the chipping process is done. In other words, these flakes in various concentrations really can give you an infinite number of custom color combinations. So if color chips are being used in the project, and generally they are because the chips do a wonderful job of masking or camouflaging maybe some of the variations that may exist in that subfloor based on the substrate that it's on. These chips, if they're going to be used, they should be made ready prior to rolling out the coating. And you always want to have a few more than a few less to be able to sprinkle into the floor. And then the other technique that I will tell you is it's always preferable to have the same person do the chipping on a particular project because everybody has a different casting spread rate. But worst case scenario, if you don't like the balance of the chips within that color, you can also add chips to that first coat of clear that will go over the color if you want to even it out. And then the last part of the process is the coating. 2 coats of clear put over this color and chipping. And the coat of clear is also a Green Guard Gold certified product with a 20-degree sheen level. And so that, I didn't want to get too much into the details, but that is essentially the process that is followed. And by the way, this does meet ASTM standards for slip resistance. I believe the COF or coefficient of friction on this product, like right out of the pail, is 0.56. There are additives that can be applied or put into it that can take it anywhere from, I think, 0.63 to 0.67, and then keeping it clean. So the conclusion for PVC flooring is that refinishing is clearly the preferred alternative considering emissions of greenhouse gases. And this is because the amount of product required to recoat the flooring is so much less than manufacturing new flooring. And I'll give you an example. If you were to recoat 1,000 square feet of resilient flooring, 50 pounds of liquid would need to be produced. Well, fortunately, 60% of that liquid is water. And so that's going to evaporate, leaving you with a net gain of 20 pounds of material that now will sit on top of that flooring. Well, if I'm going to create new PVC flooring or new LVT flooring, it takes 1,000 square feet requires 1,300 pounds to be produced. And since it's a solid, it nets out at 1,300 pounds. So before you think that, okay, Dave's going to be mad at me if I ever specify an LVT, LVP floor, the answer is no, but I will say this. The A&D community needs to make sure that owners, maintenance personnel, and end users are knowledgeable of proper maintenance for the floors that they're going to inhabit, that you're specifying, including the basic cleaning, deep cleaning, and the recoating of that floor so that you're able to maintain that floor its entire life and respect the environment. Obviously, there's a cost and conservational implication to improper care. I've seen it my whole career on the wood flooring side. I'm definitely seeing it on the resilient side as well. The other thing is that this type of finish really has the ability to withstand cleaners that are both acidic or have very high alkaline. Now, in this particular study, a building service contractor, he took an old worn VCT flooring, applied this resilient system to it, allowed it to cure for 72 hours, and then he essentially took all the products that were being used in that building that could splash on the floor and poured them in high concentration and allowed them to sit there and evaporate for 7 hours. Well, what was the result of it? They came in with a microfiber mop and just water and were able to remove all these different types of chemicals with no visible effects. None of these chemicals were able to eat into this product. So that gives you an idea of the durability of it. And you know, a renovated floor also means a healthier floor. Renovating ensures that bacteria and microorganisms are eliminated, even those that are hiding in joints, scratches, and other hard to reach areas. So from many aspects, to perform a floor care renovation is truly taking care of both health and environment. So when I first saw these next couple of slides, it really made or drove this information home to me. And I'll tell you why. Having been, in the flooring industry a long time, I have a tendency to look at floors. You can always tell the flooring person who visits the Sistine Chapel. Everybody's looking up, the flooring contractor is looking down because he wants to see the floors that are down there and how they're being taken care of. So a comment that I want to read, this is from in 2019, the country of Germany has a long tradition of stringent and clear regulations. And so they have a rule called TRBA. This is the Technical Rules for Biological Agents. It's a regulation, German regulation, which sets the standard of requirements in terms of safety, occupational health, hygiene, and work with respect to activities involving the handling of biological agents, okay? And what the point of the report is saying, if the technical rules of TRBA 250 are adhered to, then the product falls a high level of safety and health protection. So here, this is a study that was carried out. What they did was they put down a brand new LVT floor, actually a couple of different types. And after they installed it, over half of the floor, they coated it with this resilient system. And then what they did is they cleaned it with a solution that contained a fluorescent. And then they did this for a period of about 8 weeks. And then what they did, after the 8 weeks, they used UV lights and they compared the level of dirt, grime, and general contaminant removal. Well, as you can see, the results showed that the newly installed floor was highly contaminated, but the surface that had been treated with the resilient coat showed almost no contamination at all. And then to prove the test even further, what they did, as you can see in that photo, is they removed a couple of the planks that were adjacent to each other to look below the surface. And on the untreated area, a high level of contamination was found because of the penetration in between the joints. But the area that was treated with the resilient showed almost no signs. Why? Because the protective layer sealed the joints forming a monolithic surface. And so by applying a coat of this type of product, met the TRBA regulations. And here is another different type of floor that with the same testing protocols were followed. And you can see that frequent cleaning will achieve a clean looking, shiny floor. However, that does not mean that the floors are free of bacteria, which once again thrives in flooring with seams, grooves, and creases and scratches. And I remember working for a fellow years ago who polished and waxed resilient floors. And I remember one of his favorite sayings was, "I can make dirt shine." And at the time, I never really paid any attention to it. But obviously, when I've been preparing this presentation, that really stood out to me, that his idea of making dirt shine is that he could polish dirty floors and make dirty floors appear to be clean, even though they weren't. So back in 2015, 2016, at one of these TED Med events, Robin Gunther, who is a principal with Perkins and Will, did a presentation, I believe it was about 15 minutes long, and the program was titled, "Why Hospitals Are Making Us Sick." And so I'm going to quote a couple of comments she made from that presentation. She says, "How does it feel to inhabit these healthcare environments, these endlessly deep floor plans where surgeons literally never see the light of day? Summer, winter, day and night, it's always the same." Then she went on and talked a little bit more, and then she said, "Let's return to the healthcare worker who walks all day on shiny vinyl flooring. We know vinyl flooring makes people sick because healthcare workers account for more than 40% of adult occupational asthma, an issue linked to the cleaning chemicals that are used to wax and strip those floors." So this idea of a monolithic or flat surface so that we don't have any seams or creases really eliminates the environment for bacteria to grow and spread. So by doing this, obviously we have a healthier flooring surface. So I'm going to go through very quickly just a couple of case studies. Hospitals and hospital operating rooms really have a lot of daily wear and tear. We've all been there. We all understand it. And there's a lot of chemicals that we can't use in our own homes that are used in hospital settings that come in contact with the flooring surface. And obviously, resilient floors tend to be the floor surface of choice because for most healthcare facilities, because of their easy to clean surfaces. Well, when it comes time to renovate or replace resilient floors, time and safety obviously are a top priority. So not only is downtime very expensive, it adds to the layer of stress to the hospital's daily patient care routine. And here you can see for yourself the results of what took place in Centennial Hills. We can see the cost savings, we can see the time savings that they were able to achieve. And the other thing that I can read from one of my notes is that the medical team was able to tell a difference in the grip of the floor immediately and are safer walking on it during surgery. And I remember the first time I heard the story about this particular hospital, I was told a story that I'm not going to repeat. Everything worked out okay, but it was a scary, scary result. And so obviously for this hospital, this was a very important process. Another operating room. And something that I wanted to mention is that when you look at operating room costs, we talked about 75% savings and so forth. In 2019, the average OR has a cost of $36 to $37 per minute. And so 72 hours of downtime, that translates into $160,000 in revenue loss. And so obviously this is a very viable alternative. This nursing station in Arizona, they wanted to get it clean, but they also wanted it to be compliant from a safety perspective. This particular project, this renewal, saved them over $20,000. And as you can see, some of these cost savings and time savings, I want to read a comment that the author of the IVL report made. She said the norm today is new and fresh. Sales of new flooring material is supported by the linear business model we have in the construction industry today, and refinishing is often perceived as more difficult. And what these times and cost savings are clearly demonstrating is that they're not more difficult. In fact, they're a lot easier, and it is truly a game changer in the environment of refurbishing existing floors. Here's a senior care center that was done. And really, when we're trying to mitigate some of the effects of COVID and other things related to the pandemic, while creating a comfortable way of life that's supportive of well-being, really is an important consideration for all of us who have aging parents. And then, we talked about VAT. This slide is pretty self-explanatory. You can see what we avoid. You can see what we don't have to do. You can see the cost savings associated with it. And so once again, with so much VAT out there, this is a very effective way to deal with it. And then this school classroom, one of the things I really picked up on this picture right away was the light coming into this room. And all of us know that poor lighting reduces effectiveness of the brain's power to gather and process data. So anytime we can have a lighter, brighter environment in a school environment is very beneficial to our children and to our grandchildren. And here's another classroom that was renovated. This particular school district in Arizona figured they saved $40,000 by having the floors renovated versus being replaced. Cafeteria hallway, just once again, another example of refinishing and utilizing resources that we have. This is an example of a middle school that was done, but instead of talking about this particular school, I'm going to talk about one that was very similar to this that was done in Leominster, Massachusetts last week. Instead of being 5,500 square feet, it was 8,000 square feet of poured rubber. And the cost of replacing that poured rubber floor was around $40,000 to $45,000. Well, they were able to come in. Now, there was no polish on this floor, so they didn't have to do the stripping. And they were able to abrade, color in one day, put all their lines for basketball courts, volleyball courts, came in the next day, did their clear coats. And this system, instead of costing $45,000, cost less than $3,000 in materials. I forget what the labor on it, but the labor in 2 days for this was obviously far better than what it would have taken to rip out and replace this floor. Another example of this type of resilient. And one final example, coin-operated laundry machines. They like to be fed with coins, and if we have to replace a floor versus renovating it with resilient, it keeps the coin-operated machines happy and the owner of that laundromat happy, as well as providing that COF that's necessary for an environment like this where soap and suds are closely associated with it. Well, in the United States, the total cost of falling injuries for people 65 and older was $31 billion in 2015. And it resulted in over 800,000 hospitalizations. They're saying by 2030, the annual number of falling injuries is expected to be 74 million older adult Americans. So obviously having a non-slip surface is important for staff, for visitors, for clients to any of our facilities, and creating a safe and happy environment obviously increases productivity. So a Pew study found that 83% of Americans believe that climate change is a threat to those of us here in the US, and I'm going to include my friends in Canada as well. So, in addition to these climate events, we're seeing consciousness definitely being increased in the younger generation. Millennials are quickly becoming a critical group of home buyers, and they not only care about sustainability, they are demanding it. And so, for someone who has been in this field for a long time, I feel that manufacturers do have the responsibility when a better system comes along that people can benefit from, we need to make sure that they are made aware of it. So, what have we learned? I'll let you read that. I don't feel that I need to read it to you, but do keep in mind that we are all in this together. And new product innovation must take sustainability into account. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about the A&D community is so many of you are forward thinkers. You have actively been involved in making sure that people feel safe, not just during the last couple of years of COVID, but obviously for the years leading up to it. And obviously, it's my desire to make sure that you know that this process is available, it's out there, and that we can use these types of products instead of having to replace these floors. And these waterborne colors and these waterborne coatings that I'm talking about are green gold certified. Green gold is actually the old children's schools and hospital designation. So these products are specifically designed for school, for healthcare, and that third-party certification is very important versus me just putting a fig leaf on a product and saying, hey, here you are. So all of us on this call today have a responsibility to step into the role of leading sustainable product innovation, application, and specification. So thank you very much for your attention. And with that, I will turn it over to Frank in case any questions did come up in the chat.
Thank you, Dave. Dave, you mentioned earlier I live in New York City, so I'm surrounded by public housing complexes and the largest school district in the country. I believe the school district has over 3,000 to 4,000 schools. Many of them are very old and riddled with VAT. Same thing for these housing units. So to hear that we have a product that could encapsulate or coat these floors that is Green Guard Gold certified is really refreshing. And I'm really looking forward to getting that message out there. So with that, from what you've described, the product looks fairly simple to apply. Does Bona have a program or a team that can go out and train facilities teams to do this in-house?
Yes, they do. And once again, because we've been able to harness our history with coating wooden floors, we have that expertise to be able to coat these resilient floors. For anybody who has ever taken a roller and coated their wall with paint, it is a very, very similar system. It has a little bit of a different feel, but it is very similar to that. And as I mentioned before, the chipping seems to be the part of the process that sometimes is challenging. But once again, you can always re-chip by adding more color or adding chips to that first coat of clear coating. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, in addition to being children's schools and hospital certified, both the color and the coating has HMIS or hazardous material information ratings of 0, 0, 0. So obviously a very sustainable choice for some of these systems that are out there.
Thank you, Dave. And how frequently does it need to be recoated or new finish applied to the system?
Yeah, so depending on use, I know I can compare this to doing wood floors and doing a kitchen. A kitchen is a very traffic intensive area. And so a kitchen floor may need to be recoated every 3 years, where a living room may have to be done every 5 years. A lot of times commercially, we're looking at about every 2 to 3 years as far as recoating being done. But obviously, that's going to depend on the overall foot traffic associated with that particular commercial space.
Okay, so when dealing with a school or a large housing complex where they have to strip and re-wax or repolish VCT every year, that no longer needs to be done, correct?
Exactly, correct. That stripping is done. And now when you go to recoat those existing floors, all you have to do is that dry abrasion, vacuum tack and coat. So the downtime for that recoat is even less minimal than what that process is out of the gate.
It's impressive. There's a huge cost savings there. As far as colors, are we limited to the colors that were shown, or are custom colors and color chips available?
Yeah, so with those colors those base colors that you saw, they're interchangeable. I forget how many total color combinations there are, but there are quite a few. And we continue to come out with more chip variations that really also do a great job of creating a unique landscape on that floor. So it's very exciting to see.
Okay. Dave, last question. Will certificates of completion or attendance be sent via email?
Yes, so next week, I will send you the Panera, or for those of you in the Canadian market, the Tim Hortons gift card, along with your certificate of completion. If you put into the AEC website your AIA or IDCEC number, they will report your credit in 7 to 10 days. If for some reason you did not put that information in there, please feel free to send me an email and I will make sure that your credit is manually reported.
Dave, that concludes the questions for today.
Very good. Thank you very much for attending, folks. Appreciate it.